Welcome to Inside the Village, a podcast from Awaken Village Press. This is a space for honest conversations about creativity, meaningful work, and the journey of bringing ideas into the world, and also the bigger questions that shape our lives and who we become along the way. Through different conversations and reflections, my hope is that this podcast offers you not just insight, but a sense of connection, a reminder that you're not doing this alone. I'm really glad you're here. So we're talking about editing and the process of editing one's book.
Or having one's book edited, more precisely.
Even more precisely, having one's book edited, right? Yeah. So I'm in that process myself right now, Matt, right? I'm in the kind of first rounds of having another person looking at my material. And this is material that I wrote years ago. And then, of course, I've worked on for over a year. And now it's like, it's bringing up a lot of stuff.
So be more specific. What is it bringing up for you? Because normally you're the book doula, and now you're back in the seat of the author. So this is a bit of a reversal.
Right. Which is so fascinating because exactly, I feel like I get to play the role of editor at some level, right? Though I do not play the role of line editor. And I think in both cases, being in the author's seat is different. And being in the author's seat now, I'm feeling like what it's bringing up for me is a few things. One, I feel like in some ways, my thoughts are being challenged, or how I'm saying it is being challenged more specifically, maybe, right? And I'm also facing this tension between, like, is this still my voice, or is my voice being lost? And then I also am feeling, yes, but what if the way I say it isn't clear, right? So then the editor's job is to make sure a reader can really absorb and understand my writing, right? Like, I mean, that the editor is here to do that. And so I'm noticing that, and then there's like this other deeper layer that I don't even know if it has anything to do with the editor, of just now being back in my book again as the author, someone who, I mean, some of these words were authored more than 5 years ago. And now I'm sort of coming back to them and these ideas and who I was at that time, and having to really face that and like sit with that again and just be like, oh, I don't know if I like that person, or I don't even know if I believe that, or not that I don't believe it anymore, because I think the core beliefs and concepts I still believe. It's more of the, like, how I operated and the way I reacted and the things that kind of mattered to me then, or the thoughts I was grappling with then, are not the same as now. And so it's just confronting, no matter what, to sort of be in that editing phase, because it's like I have to go back through all of it again.
Right. Fascinating.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I'm interested in is you have some of this material that you wrote more than 5 years ago, and you have now like the finished first draft of the manuscript. But if you're no longer resonating with that, how do you make the decision of like, okay, do I keep this? Do we scratch it and go back to the drawing board? Like, how do you even make that decision?
Yeah. And that's the big one. And I'm going to say at some point, the decision is just, I'm not even letting it be an option at this point to scrap it, right? Like, to me at this point, it's like, nope, this is going to be published. It's going to get as good as it can get, and we're going to publish it, because I do believe there's a process as an author that I've seen other authors go through. And I've also gone through myself, which is of course, the doubt, I'm not this person anymore, therefore. And I actually just got a message from an author I've been working with for years, on and off. And she's currently a part of the village. And I said, so how are things going? Like, how's your process and where are you at? I knew she had, like, because she'd had a book idea, she like set it aside, started another book idea, then went back to the first idea being like, I think there's really something here, which I agreed with. I'm like, I think you really have something there. And so she's been working on it, and she goes, yeah, I think I'm going to scrap like 70% of it or something. I'm reading it again, and I feel like it's, again, she sort of used this idea, or she shared this idea of, it was like, again, a former version of herself, or like this, the stories she shared, or the whatever. And it's hard for her to read those now. And I heard her, and some of my response to her is what I'm going to say right now, which is, I do understand that. And for every one of us who, like, for the Amanda who wrote those things in 2020 and felt those things in 2020 and had those limiting beliefs and chatter in my mind in 2020. Like, there is someone out there today with that exact same, like, who's at that exact same place, right? There's someone out there today who is probably thinking those same thoughts I was thinking 5 years ago,
Mhm.
and or having the same questions, or having the same a similar experience. And I feel like I am not doing the reader a service by saying, you know what, that's not me anymore. I'm going to scrap it and just write what's current. Is I think the book writing process is so long. I think it's just it's inevitable. Like, unless we get really, really, really efficient at it, uh, it's sort of like, yes, by the time a book comes out, almost inevitably we will be a different person by that point.
Mhm.
And I do believe I owe it to, like, my former self, who I believe is also a reader, or maybe many readers out there, to still say it and to share it. And
Mhm.
I I'm currently trusting that the vulnerability I have around it, and even the gosh, is this any good? Does it even make sense? Because a lot of it also, you might know more about this, like, from a psychological perspective. It's almost like it's sort of cognitive dissonance, maybe, or it's like, at some point in our journey, I do feel like something just snapped. It's like, oh, we flip the switch, right? I mean, there's plenty of patterns that we keep playing out, and there's plenty of things that we keep doing and seeing repeated over and over. But, like, there's some point, I think, or many points on the journey, where we're kind of like, oh, that doesn't even, like, I can't even remember what that was like anymore, or I can't, you know what I mean? Like, there's something that happens, and I do think, as I'm reviewing previous material, that is part of the challenge, so it's like I'm sort of trying to access a part of myself that doesn't truly exist anymore, and I'm reading it through a lens of a new persona. Um and it's almost like, does this make sense? Because I'm not, I think I mean, again, it could also just be a pile of crap. I don't think it is, but I think there's something else going on psychologically and emotionally that makes it really challenging as an author. And this is where I would love to get the editor's perspective, right? Because I think the editor, is coming at it from a very different angle.
They come from a blank slate. They're not you.
Mhm.
From an outsider's
Mhm.
perspective, and then they bring their own skill set. They read a manuscript differently than the author reads the manuscript. Um, yeah, and the editors that I've had, the places where they get stuck have been like the greatest benefit I have received from having them like go through the process of editing my work, because it's like, "Oh, I didn't even realize that I was losing you there. But the fact that I lost you means that I'm going to lose a whole bunch of other people if it stays this way." Yeah. But the other piece that you were
Absolutely.
speaking to is, I think, in my process of writing, I had this idealized image that the book would perfectly reflect me for all time, right? Because I'm writing a reflection of me onto the pages. But even like you were saying, book publishing takes a while. But then after the book gets published, we continue to grow and change too. And so the book is going to be like a way marker of a particular period for each of us in our biography, in our journey. And I don't think that I had to disabuse myself of the idea that this book was going to be current at any point for me. And the farther I go, the less current it becomes, obviously. Yeah.
And this is something I think I feel any author in the nonfiction space specifically is feeling, right? And maybe fiction authors too. I don't know what their process is like, but yeah, any of us nonfiction writers, and specifically anyone who, but yeah, even those who aren't writing personal stories, they are still capturing a moment in time of the beliefs they have, the way they receive information, what they think is effective, what is, and if we are evolving as often as I think we are, at least in some ways, like I said, I think some core beliefs and tenets may not ever change for some of us, or they'll change really slowly, or maybe over a much larger period of time. But I think, yeah, for many of us, and the writing process is sometimes that way of giving voice to these things so that we can evolve and grow and, see it differently, and maybe change. So I think you're spot on. And um I love your kind of shift of, yes, these are just little markers along the trail, right? I also think of it like as a snapshot. It's like we just took a
Hmm.
picture of that time, and we put it into words, and we put it on a shelf. And it's like going back to our photos. Look, I do not look like that I looked at 25. Okay, I don't even look like how I looked at 40. But I'm not gonna, like, throw my photos out, right? Because I don't look
Right.
that way anymore or not post them, right? So, yeah, I think these are little snapshots of who we have been and who we are and then who we are becoming.
So now I want to
Um,
ask you about personal fit with the editor. Because
mm,
on the one hand, I want an editor with enough like background information to like have to be able to understand what I'm writing and give me like nuanced feedback, right? But then on the other hand, if I just have an editor who agrees with everything I say, we're kind of losing something here. Like I also want an editor to challenge me, to like get in there and be like, well,
mhm.
hey, let's look at this, right? What do you think about that?
So as an editor, so if I go back into my like put my editor hat on, and again, while I don't do line editing, I feel like where I think any stage of editing, maybe until we get to proofreading, alignment is important. Personally feel alignment is possibly more important even in earlier stages. And I say that because maybe because that's just my role and what I'm experienced at. But I do think there's something about when we are developing an idea, it's really good to know we've got a partner who can be that, like that thought partner, right? Who can be that, and not just to agree with us, but sometimes in order to challenge us, we actually have to know a lot about the same topics or ideas. Otherwise, I might just read what you're saying and go, oh, that sounds great. Oh, cool. Didn't know about that. Sure. Oh, yeah. And I would just read it as
Totally.
someone being like, wow, I've never, but if we're sort of on the same playing field, right? And like we're reading some of the same things or we're having similar conversations in life or we've had some similar experiences in life, I might be able to say, "Ooh, you're describing it this way, but what about this?" Or I've heard it described this way. What do you think? Or and I'm able to bring my similar or parallel experience to the table, which is I think what I like what I love about what I do and working with the authors I work with in the vein of work we work in. And I do believe I get to be that like player on the field, thought partner. I think when we get to line editing, I think there's still a benefit there to ensure that the line editor also isn't just like, well, what does this mean? And it's like, well, that word might be, I'm glad you're questioning it because again, we don't want our readers to be lost either. Um, but then we also might go, well, if a reader is if they also play in this field, right, and they're going to pick up my book because they feel a resonance, or they're going to pick up your book because they feel a resonance with these ideas or some of these concepts, they might read that word or phrase and go, they might know exactly what I mean, right? Because it's sort of shared language. It's a shared, I'm thinking of words like divine union, or I'm thinking of words like, I mean, just some of these like bigger ideals or ideas that, again, you and I might have a different definition, but you might read that phrase and go, oh, I see what she's pointing at, right? Like I have an energetic sense where, and so I think when we find an editor who may be we could to be a mismatch, it is interesting how much are they able to shine a light on what doesn't work for a reader that doesn't play it on our field. Like I'm not saying field as if like I'm looking at a sporting event or something, right? Like we're all playing the same game, and so we kind of know the language, we know what the rules are. And if I'm a soccer player and then I go watch a football game, I might have a lot more questions, right? But if it's like, but you probably aren't meant to be at a football game, or not meant to be like I'm kind of targeting a soccer fan. You know what I mean? Maybe not a football fan. So I think there's benefit in having, yes, a thought partner, especially in the early stages, maybe even as a line editor, or at least someone who kind of has a sense of what you're writing about. And then on the other hand, having that editor who might say, I don't know if this is clear to me because maybe I don't know this subject matter as well. And that does give the author, or myself in this case as an author, the chance to sit and really think like, oh, have I explained it well enough? Or am I just using language in terms that I assume people are going to understand? Right. So I think, and speaking from my experience, what I'm recognizing is I didn't have that initial thought partner developmental editor, right? Because I was playing my own version. So I've kind of really been in my own head around a lot of this content from the very beginning. And so I sort of skipped a step in my own process that I find really valuable for other authors. But yeah, what do you think about that in terms of what I've said?
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, developmental editor as thought partner is so valuable and so useful. I am currently in a PhD program, And so my writing is getting read by professors right now. And eventually I will be going through a dissertation process. And the framework for that is, let me be thorough with you, them saying to me, let me be thorough with you in service to you learning the skill set and achieving a level of excellence that we hold ourselves to in this field. And so having people who really understand what they're doing get in with my writing and give me feedback is some of the most valuable like experience I can possibly get. And at the same time, it's vulnerable, it's personal. You know, I love my words. They put them there for a reason, right?
Yeah.
And so there is a certain level of humility on my side to receive the feedback. And then there's a dance between my voice and having things the way I want it versus the feedback that I'm getting and how that gets integrated into the piece of writing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Yes,
think
so
the
many
discomfort is
layers.
okay.
Absolutely. Well, that is to me like, and it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a mismatch. Sometimes there is, right? Sometimes we can. I think you shared like maybe there was a professor that you're like, you just really aren't getting it, and there could have been a mismatch where, I have talked to authors who are like, I've been matched with this editor, or I hired this editor or whatever. Boy, I just really feel like they don't understand me, right? I think there can be certainly mismatches in the author editor relationship. And I think you're right. It's like part of the process is the discomfort of it, right? Like it's the, oh, I kind of, I'm not sure about that. I even I have a very personal relationship with my editor, which, I think helps and maybe at times doesn't help, but, I think I'm leaning into the fact that it does help because I can just message her and be like, listen, if I'm sounding a little harsh in my comments or if I'm being a little right now, just bear with me. And it's funny because again, I've been in the editor position, again, not line editor. So I think each level of editing does have it has a different flavor, right? Each layer has a different flavor in terms of where the author is, in terms of the relationship and the dynamic. But I've witnessed authors go through the line editing phase as I kind of poke into the document, or maybe I'm called in to look at something, having been involved as a developmental editor. And it's funny sometimes to see how some authors, woo wee, it can get real emotional in those comments. It can get real. So there is and I don't. It's not like anyone's to blame or it's not someone's fault. I really do think, and like I say all of this knowing there's always the case where like, yeah, it's just not a good fit. Maybe that editor isn't as experienced. That is always a possibility. But I think also just because there is that sort of friction point as the author, it doesn't mean those things, right? I think it is us going through the fire. And to me, as I've talked about so many times in so many places, the transformation we go through as the author is so much a part of the journey and a part of the process. And um who we become as an author, and like all of these little steps along the trail um are part of it, right? And how we respond to that feedback. And that doesn't mean, I've had authors say, maybe in my next round with an editor, I will be a bit more forthcoming or forthright to say, please, like, I think authors also learn in this process what is theirs to still stand by, right? And I don't know if you've experienced this in your work, either with your first, books with your editors or even in your graduate program where it's like, you know what, I'm going to really listen to you and take your advice, except I'm really also, I'm going to stand on this hill. Like I'm going to die on this hill. I'm going to put my flag down and say, this, I'm not changing, like, how do you balance
Hmm.
that?
Intuition and feel, like, you know,
Hmm.
gut,
Hmm.
gut level. And it's also okay
Yep.
to get multiple perspectives. You know, I,
Yeah.
for some of the larger decisions for my second book came out at 130,000 words, which is long, is a big book. And there was a question
Big
that I
book.
was grappling with the whole way through of, do I split this into two books or not? And so like I was thinking about it the whole way through. I was like, well, I think one book is the way. And then I gave it to my editor and he raised the same point independently. He was like, you could split the book here. And I sat with it. He said, it's like, it's going to be okay either way. And I like talked to some other people and got more perspectives on it. And then I just felt into my intuition. I was like, no, it's all coming through for a reason. It's just going to have to be a long book. And I'm okay with that. So I think that, like, I would say whatever you decide is ultimately going to be the right decision because this is a creative act.
100% agree. And actually, I was, I've been feeling some like, fiery energy the last few days. And like last week, end of last week, I reached a point where I needed to actually just give voice to some of the frustration, and I think it will in the near future turn into something a bit more productive where I can actually just share this information with an audience of sorts. But I wasn't there on Friday. I just had to first get it out. But part of what I was saying, and I feel really speaks to what you just addressed, was there really is no wrong decision, right? I mean, whether that comes down to do you keep this one book or two books, and which cover. I'm still in the process, and I'm literally remembering just in this moment, like, oh, I never got back to my cover designer about my cover. So it's because in like that also is a really confronting process of like choosing the cover and anyway. So all again, this is why people hire book doulas and people to track this for them. Just a little plug there for what I do for everyone else and somehow sometimes struggle to do for myself. Isn't that the way of it? Anyway, but my point was this idea that there's no wrong choice. And I know a lot of authors can get stuck. And you faced it well into the process, right? You were like, here's 130,000 words. And now what am I going to do with this? Like, what direction am I going to go? And I love that you trusted your intuition, that you got quiet. Plus, you sought some outside, advice just to like, hey, like, want to run this by you. I think all of that's so valid. And when I see a lot of authors in, again, the earlier stages of their process, and I see this come up a lot around authors around the structure of their book. And sometimes they aren't that early. Sometimes it's not that early in the process. Sometimes they're like months and even sometimes years in, but they're like, they've gotten a structure. They maybe have an outline. They've already been working toward it. And then they get to this point of like, you know what? I think it needs a better outline or it needs a better structure, or the structure could be different, or it could be or maybe even coming into that, they get stuck because they aren't sure what the right structure is in order to write the book, right? And as much as I believe in structure, and I know structure is important, it's essential to the book, right? It's essential to how the message is going to be conveyed and communicated and carried and understood and everything. I'm such a deep believer in there's no one structure that is going to work for your book. It's a creative process, right? So it's kind of like if you're being guided towards something, follow that through. You can, of course, there can be some changes and modifications. And again, that's why some people are just really good at helping with structure if a person doesn't already have that intuitive sense, or like some of us just have that innately, right? We're like, oh, I see this as like three parts and I can, great. Some people don't. And so if you don't think that way already, that could be a place to lean in and ask for some additional support. But what I see over and over again is this like assumption that there's like this one effective structure. And it's like, if I don't find it, my book's going to fail. It's like, no, it's like there's no one way to paint a painting, or there's no one way to make a movie. We see that there are things that work, and then there's some things that don't work. We find that there's some, um, templates, and we watch a lot of movies that kind of follow us an arc, and it's like, oh yeah, that's really effective. And then you find the guy or the movie that's like, whoa, you just really took us in a different direction, and that was really fascinating and super interesting. Because it's an act of creation. And so I think anyone in the creative undertaking of a book, it's like trust your instincts, trust your intuition, get some outside help. That is what editors or friends or advisors are there for. Specifically people who have a skill set, who know what they're maybe what they're talking about, and then know that there's not just one and only, right? I mean, I could have structured my books in lots of different ways probably, but I chose a structure that felt true for me or intuitive to me, and I followed it, right? And I think that can be um hopefully that can be a little reassuring for authors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Love that. Okay, so Amanda, you are In the book editing process now with your manuscript, what would you say is the biggest thing
Yeah.
that you're learning or taking away from being back in this seat?
Wow, I love that question. I feel the biggest thing I am learning right now is the humility that is required of being an author. And because I think so it's really easy to just be like, "I just wrote a great book." And I think as an author, it's so important to celebrate oneself, right? Because it is no small feat. I say that over and over again. So like to have this big celebration, a couple months ago, and I was like, "I'm done," was really important. And I encourage all authors to do that. But I'd say now I'm getting to remember and relearn, like, all right, there's also humility. There's also, I'm also learning, at least at this exact moment, right now I'm about a third of the way through my book, right? So it's like I've still got a long ways to go or a ways to go. We're not done yet. So I'm kind of in that early stages of the editing process, which I do feel is different than the later stages. And so in these early stages of the editing process, I really am also feeling and learning how to continue to be really compassionate with myself. Um, where when I do feel that like, oh, is that any good? Or oh gosh, I can't like, does this even make sense? And again, my editor is not calling those things out. I'm the one sort of critiquing it as I'm going again. And I think inviting me back into a layer of compassion, place of sort of like the trust of this did come through me for a reason, right? Like it may it may be tricky to read now for what all the reasons we've already talked about, right? Like, but in this moment, can I trust that there was a reason that these particular stories, that these particular experiences, that like these particular words wanted to come through me? And be compassionate with the part of me that's feeling really like insecure or vulnerable or like unsure. And also just trust again. That's why we're going through this editing process. And that's what this whole journey is about. So, yeah, those are my lessons right now.
Beautiful. Great lessons. And it occurs to me that, like, we think that a lot of the lessons of the book process happens during the writing, but it's actually the whole process from the moment you sit down to
Yes.
the writing, to the editing, to then the publishing and bringing it out into the world. The lessons just keep on coming, right? Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm thinking of an author. We just published her book in January and she's talking to me now. She's like, if I only knew what I'd still be learning. I mean, she's still in the process of who she's become and what she learned. And now she's marketing the book. And now, so yes, it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. I
Cool.
love that we are talking about this. I love that we were talking about this today, Matt.
Wonderful. This has been an impromptu conversation from just what was real, what was alive
Absolutely.
here. And there are so many
Yes,
nuggets of wisdom to harvest. So hopefully authors and editors and anybody in the process got some good points from today's conversation.
absolutely. And we appreciate you listening. So thanks for going on that little impromptu journey with us. I loved it.
Thanks, Amanda. That was
Take
fun.
care. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. If something in today's episode resonated with you and you're wanting a space to explore your own creative path, I'd love to welcome you into the Authors Village, our community for writers, creators, and thoughtful humans walking this path together. You can learn more through the link in our show notes. Until next time, thanks for being here.